David had only been living in his new home for 1 week when the trouble began. He had imagined peace, quiet mornings, and long evenings on his porch watching the sunset. The house was small but comfortable, located in a calm neighborhood with tall trees, friendly birds, and wide clean streets. For David, this place felt like a fresh start. But on a warm Tuesday morning, he opened his front door and found a white envelope lying on his doormat. At first, he didn't think much of it. Maybe it was a welcome letter or a delivery mistake. But when he picked it up, he felt a strange chill. The envelope had red bold letters across the top. Final notice, HOA fees due. David frowned. Final notice? Fees? HOA? He wasn't part of any HOA. He never signed anything. No one had ever mentioned any homeowners association when he bought the house. And the neighborhood didn't look like the fancy type of place that usually had an HOA. There was no guard gate, no pool, no clubhouse, nothing like that. Still confused, he opened the envelope. Inside, he found a printed letter with a long list of charges. It claimed he owed $1,200 in fees for community maintenance. At the bottom was a warning. Failure to pay may result in additional penalties. David let out a frustrated sigh. This must be a mistake, he whispered to himself. He placed the letter on the kitchen table and tried to ignore it. Maybe someone else with the same house number owed money. Maybe the letter had been delivered to the wrong place. These things happen all the time, he told himself, and he decided not to worry. But the next day, when he opened the door again, another letter was waiting. This one looked even more aggressive. It had a bright yellow sticker that read, "Urgent, immediate action required." David shook his head. What is going on? This second letter claimed he now owed even more $1,350, because a late fee had been added overnight. That didn't make sense at all. How could he be late when he didn't even know he owed anything? David walked across the street to talk to his neighbor, an older man named Mr. Harris. He had waved at David before, but they had never spoken. "Sir," David said politely, holding up the letter, "do you know anything about an HOA here?" Mr. Harris laughed, a dry and tired laugh. "HOA? In this neighborhood?" he asked. "Son, we haven't had an HOA here in years. It shut down long ago. Nobody here pays anything." This only confused David even more. "So why am I getting these letters?" Mr. Harris shrugged. "No idea. Maybe someone's making a mistake. Or maybe someone's trying to push something new. Hard to tell these days." David thanked him and walked back home, feeling uneasy. He didn't like confusion. He liked clear answers. But this situation felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. Later that evening, David called the number printed on the letter. It rang 3 times, and then a woman answered in a cold, robotic tone. "Ridgewood Community HOA, how may I assist you?" David explained that he had only just moved in and didn't understand why he was being charged. The woman interrupted him before he even finished. "According to our records, your property is part of our association. Fees must be paid on time. If you do not pay, additional fines will be applied." He tried to ask for proof. He tried to explain that his neighbor said the HOA didn't exist anymore. But the woman kept repeating the same thing, like she was reading from a script. "Fees must be paid. You are responsible. Pay before the due date." David ended the call, feeling irritated and slightly alarmed. Something was not right. Her tone, the repeated phrases, the refusal to provide proof, it all felt suspicious. He decided to ignore the letters again. If the HOA wasn't real, then what could they do? Maybe everything would stop if he didn't respond. But it didn't stop. 3 days later, he found not one but 3 envelopes waiting at his door. One said second final notice, which made no sense at all. Another said your property may face legal action. Legal action? For something he didn't owe? David sat on the couch, the letters spread out in front of him. A feeling he didn't like crept into his stomach. Something about this was bigger than a simple mistake. The letters were too aggressive, the warnings too strong, the fees rising too fast. For the first time since he moved in, the house didn't feel peaceful anymore. He picked up one letter and read the last line again. Failure to respond may lead to further consequences. Then he noticed something he hadn't seen before, small, almost hidden text at the bottom. Board Representative M. Carter. A name. A real person. Someone behind all of this. David didn't know it yet, but this single name would pull him into a strange and unexpected battle, one he never asked for, but one he would have to fight. And the first warning was only the beginning. For 2 days, David tried to distract himself. He cleaned the garage, unpacked more boxes, and even started painting the living room. But no matter what he did, his mind kept returning to those threatening letters, and that single name at the bottom, M. Carter. He didn't know who this person was, but the fear of the unknown kept sitting in the back of his mind like a heavy stone. On the morning of the third day, something happened that made the whole situation suddenly feel very real. David was sipping coffee in his kitchen when he heard a sharp, unexpected knock at his front door. It wasn't the normal, friendly kind of knock. It was firm, like someone trying to show authority. He froze. A part of him hoped it was just a neighbor. But a deeper part of him already knew who it might be. He set his mug down and walked to the door slowly. When he opened it, he felt a quick chill run down his spine. A man stood there. Thin, tall, and dressed in a dark gray suit. He held a black folder under his arm, and his expression was serious, too serious for an ordinary neighborhood visit. "Good morning," the man said in a stiff voice. "Are you David Collins?" "Yes," David answered cautiously. The man opened his folder without even greeting him properly. "My name is Mark Carter. I represent the Ridgewood Community Homeowners Association. I believe you've received our letters." David's heart dropped. So this was him. The name from the bottom of the page. The ghost behind the warnings. But something about the man felt off. His suit looked old, wrinkled, and a little too tight, like it wasn't really his. His smile, when he attempted one, never reached his eyes. David stepped outside so the man wouldn't try to push his way in. "Yes, I received your letters," David said, trying to stay calm. "But I'm not part of any HOA. My neighbor said this neighborhood doesn't have one." Carter's smile twitched. "Your neighbor is misinformed," he said quickly. "The HOA is active. You moved into a protected community. Fees are mandatory." He flipped through his papers and pulled out a sheet. "You currently owe $1,350. That includes late fees. If you do not pay by Friday, additional penalties will apply." David stared at the paper without taking it. "Can you show me proof?" he asked slowly. "Proof that my house is part of this HOA? Because the county records show nothing." Carter's face stiffened for a moment. Just a moment. But David caught it. That flash of discomfort. That tiny hesitation. Then Carter quickly forced his expression back to normal. "The documents are complicated," he said. "Old, but legitimate. We are in the process of updating them with the county." David didn't like the answer. It sounded too convenient, too rehearsed. "Then show me the original documents," David insisted. "Or show me where it says my property is included. Otherwise, I won't pay anything." For the first time, Carter looked uncomfortable. He shifted from one foot to the other and tightened his grip on the folder. "The details will be presented if this issue goes to court," he said sharply. That was a threat. A real one. David crossed his arms. "So you want to take me to court without proof?" Carter's eyes narrowed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said quietly, almost like a warning. "Most homeowners pay. They don't ask questions." That sentence told David everything he needed to know. Most homeowners pay. They don't ask questions. This wasn't a normal HOA. This was something else, something hidden and possibly dishonest. David took a deep breath and stood his ground. "I want written proof," he said firmly. "Until then, don't send me threats and don't come to my house again." Carter stared at him for a long moment. Too long. Then he slowly closed his folder. "As you wish," he said. But his voice was cold. And his eyes looked like someone who wasn't used to being challenged. Before leaving, Carter leaned slightly forward and lowered his voice. "You should know, avoiding payments never ends well." David's jaw tightened. "Is that a warning?" he asked. Carter didn't answer. He simply turned around, walked down the driveway, and got into a black car parked across the street. There was no logo, no company name, just a plain, unmarked vehicle. David watched him drive away, feeling a knot form in his stomach. He went back inside and locked the door even though it was daytime. For the rest of the afternoon, David couldn't focus on anything. Every sound, a car passing, a branch tapping the window, made him tense. Who was this Carter? If the HOA was real, why couldn't he show the documents? Why were the letters threatening court? And why did he seem so nervous when David asked for proof? By sunset, David realized something important. This wasn't just about money. Something deeper was going on. And whatever it was, Carter didn't want him to discover it. But David wasn't planning to back down anymore. This was his home. He had every right to know the truth. And tomorrow, he was going to search for answers, no matter what he found. David didn't sleep much that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Carter's blank stare, the strange folder, and that unmarked black car slowly pulling away from his driveway. Something about the man felt wrong, like he was hiding something big. By morning, David had made up his mind. He needed real answers. Not guesses. Not rumors. Real proof. He started with the easiest place, his own kitchen table, where he had kept all the HOA letters. He spread them out like pieces of a crime puzzle. Under the bright morning light, he noticed small details he had missed before. The HOA logo looked blurry, almost like it was copied from somewhere. The signatures on the letters were different each time, but all were labeled secretary. The phone number led to the same robotic-sounding woman, no matter what option he pressed. The more he stared at the papers, the more everything looked fake. But a feeling kept whispering inside him. Fake things don't usually take people to court. So what was this? He needed expert help. The visit to the county office. David drove to the county property office, a large glass building with long hallways and quiet workers typing behind tall counters. He approached a desk where a woman in her mid-50s sat, sorting through folders. "Hi," David began politely. "I need information about my property. Specifically about any HOA attached to it." The woman adjusted her glasses and typed his address into the computer. It took only 3 seconds before she frowned. "Oh, that's strange," she murmured. David leaned forward. "What do you see?" "There's no HOA connected to your lot," she said. "Not currently. Not previously. Nothing." David felt his stomach twist. He had expected confusion, but not a complete blank. "Are you sure?" he asked. She turned the screen toward him. The property history was clear. No HOA listed. No contracts. No registration. No fees ever recorded. And then she added something odd. "We used to have an HOA for that area, many years ago. But it was dissolved. Completely shut down. The paperwork is archived." David's eyes widened. "So no active HOA exists there now?" "None," she confirmed. "If someone is charging you fees, they're not operating through us. Not operating legally." A cold chill ran through David from head to toe. The old box of archived records. The woman noticed his worried face and said gently, "If you want, I can show you the old archive. The HOA files are stored in a back room. Might help you understand what's going on." David agreed. She led him to a dusty storage area behind a sliding metal door. Old boxes lined the shelves with labels fading from age. She pulled one down labeled Ridgewood HOA, closed. Inside were old meeting notes, financial logs, and board names. Most of the papers were yellowed, some cracked at the edges. David flipped through them slowly, and then he froze. The last recorded board members included a name he recognized. Vice President, Mark Carter. But the picture next to it showed a much older man than the one who stood on David's porch. This man had gray hair, round glasses, and a tired smile. The Carter who visited him looked at least 20 years younger. A chill ran over David's skin. "Is this the same Carter?" he asked. The woman looked at the photo and shook her head. "That board was dissolved almost 12 years ago," she said. "And this man would be in his late 60s by now." David stared at the name again. Mark Carter. Same name. Different face. "So someone else is using his identity," David whispered. The woman frowned. "Sir, you should be careful. If someone is pretending to be an HOA representative, that's serious fraud." He swallowed hard. Fraud. That word felt heavy. A suspicious car. Leaving the office with copies of the archived documents, David walked toward his car and immediately felt something wrong. A black sedan was parked at the far end of the parking lot. Not just any sedan. The same unmarked one he had seen outside his house. It was facing him. Engine running. Windows dark. David's heartbeat quickened. For a moment, he stood frozen, trying to act normal. He didn't want to show fear. He got into his car, calmly buckled his seatbelt, and tried not to look directly at the sedan. But when he glanced at the mirror, he saw a silhouette inside, watching him. He drove off. And the black car pulled out too, slowly, but clearly following. Losing the tail. David took side streets, changed lanes, and even pulled into a gas station to see what the sedan would do. It passed by once, slow and silent. No plates on the front. No logo. No identifying marks. The same car. No doubt. David's pulse thumped in his ears. Whoever this Carter was. Whoever these people were. They were watching him even outside his home. And that meant one thing. They knew he was looking for answers. Determined to expose the truth. Back home, David locked the door and closed the curtains. He spread the archived documents across the dining table. A fake HOA. A fake representative. A stolen identity. Threat letters. And now someone following him. This wasn't about simple fees anymore. Someone wanted money desperately. Someone wanted control. David realized something. He was no longer dealing with an HOA problem. He was dealing with a scam so organized, it could fool an entire neighborhood. And whoever was behind it didn't want him digging further. But David wasn't going to stop. Not after today. He sat down, took a deep breath, and whispered to himself. It's time to expose them. David woke up the next morning with a heavy feeling in his chest. He hadn't slept well. The image of the black sedan following him kept replaying in his head like a dark loop. Every creak in the house, every shifting shadow, made him turn his head. But when he walked outside to check the morning light, he found something worse than fear. An official-looking envelope was taped directly to his front door. This weren't like the past letters. This one had a new heading. Notice of legal action, court summons. David felt his throat tighten. Court summons? So soon? Why so fast? His hands shook as he pulled the envelope off the door and opened it. Inside was a thick packet with multiple pages. It said he was being sued by Ridgewood Community HOA for unpaid fees, late charges, and non-cooperation. But the most shocking part was a new allegation. Homeowner refused to communicate with HOA representative and acted hostile. David's jaw dropped. Hostile? He hadn't even raised his voice. Then he saw something that made his stomach twist. Attached to the packet was a photo. A blurry picture of him standing on his porch, talking to Carter. Someone had taken the picture secretly, from the street. David stepped back from the door. Someone had been watching him. Not only following him, but taking pictures. He scanned the street quickly. Everything looked normal. Cars parked. Lawns quiet. No people outside. But that quietness suddenly felt unnatural, too still, like someone had pressed pause on the whole neighborhood. The phone call. Inside, David immediately called the number he found in the packet, supposedly the courthouse number. A woman picked up. "Yes, this is the clerk's office," she said. David explained the situation, the fake HOA, and the sudden summons. The woman paused and asked, "What's the case number?" David read it out. Another pause. A longer one. "Sir," she said slowly, "we have no case filed under that number." David blinked. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said. "If someone sent you fake court summons, you should contact local authorities." Fake. Even the summons was fake. David ended the call, feeling both relieved and terrified. If they were willing to fake legal action, what else were they willing to do? A letter with no return address. As he set the packet down, he noticed something strange. A smaller envelope had fallen out of the packet. This one had no logo, no address, no stamp. Just his name written in shaky handwriting. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single line. "Stop digging. Stop now." No signature. No explanation. The handwriting looked rushed, almost like it was written by someone who didn't want to be recognized. David took a step back. Someone in the neighborhood, maybe someone close, was involved. Someone who knew his address well enough to hand-deliver a warning. But the question was the letter meant to scare him? Or to protect him? The conversation with the neighbor. Later that afternoon, David saw his neighbor Mr. Harris watering his plants. He walked over with the fake summons in hand. "Mr. Harris," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something important." The old man looked up, concern already in his eyes. David showed him the packet. Harris sighed heavily. "I was afraid something like this would happen again," the old man muttered. "Again?" David repeated. "What do you mean again?" Harris glanced around nervously, then lowered his voice. "Years back, after the real HOA was shut down, a small group of people tried to restart it. But they weren't doing it the legal way. They were collecting money personally, keeping it for themselves." David felt his heartbeat pick up. "Who were they?" David asked. Harris shook his head. "I don't know all their names. But I do remember one thing. People started getting strange letters. Fake threats. Fake fees. And some homeowners paid because they didn't want trouble." David clenched his fists. This was bigger than he thought. "And the police never stopped them?" he asked. "They disappeared before it became a big case," Harris said. "No one could prove anything. They were organized." David felt the unease settle deeper. "And Carter?" he asked. "The man who came to my house?" Harris hesitated. "There was a Carter back then. The old one. Not this young one. But if someone's using his name again, that means the old group might be active." David's breath went shallow. "So they're back?" Harris didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silent night. That night, David double-checked every lock in his house. He closed all the curtains. He even left the hallway light on. But the house still didn't feel safe. As he sat on the couch, he heard something outside. A slow engine. A car stopping. Then silence. He didn't look out the window. He was too afraid of what he might see. But he knew the pattern already. He knew which car it was. The same unmarked black sedan. Watching. Waiting. The HOA wasn't backing off. They were escalating. David makes a decision. At midnight, with fear slowly turning into anger, David made up his mind. If they wanted to scare him. If they wanted to push him into silence. They had picked the wrong man. He took out all the documents, the fake letters, the old HOA files, the fake summons, and the threatening note. And he whispered to himself. If they want a fight, they'll get one. Tomorrow, he would meet with someone who could help him uncover everything. A lawyer friend who wasn't afraid of messy cases. He didn't know it yet, but this decision would push him straight into the heart of the scam. And closer to the people behind it. David barely slept the night before the court hearing. His mind kept replaying the strange letters, the black sedan, the fake summons, and Carter's cold stare. But what bothered him most was the warning note. Stop digging. Stop now. He kept wondering who wrote it. Someone trying to scare him. Or someone trying to help him? By morning, David felt tired but strangely determined. Today was the day he finally faced them, not outside his house, not on the phone, but in a courtroom, where lies could finally be exposed. His lawyer friend, Daniel, had agreed to help for free after hearing the whole story. When David arrived at the courthouse steps, Daniel was already waiting, tall, confident, carrying a thin black briefcase. You ready? Daniel asked. No, David admitted. But I'm here. That's enough, Daniel said with a reassuring smile. Let's see who these people really are. Entering the courtroom. The courtroom was bigger than David expected, rows of wooden benches, a silent judge's bench, and a large seal on the wall. A few people sat scattered across the room, waiting for their own cases. But David's eyes locked instantly on one group at the far side. 3 people. All dressed in cheap suits. Sitting together like they were hiding their nervousness behind fake confidence. And in the middle was Carter. He wasn't wearing his suit from before. Instead, he wore a nicer one, cleaner, newer. It looked like he was trying to appear official. But the moment he saw David enter, his face tightened. He whispered something to the woman beside him. She nodded quickly, flipping through a binder. David swallowed. So this was their board. The fake HOA. The judge arrives. A court clerk called out. Case number 2715, Ridgewood Community HOA versus David Collins. The judge entered, an older woman with sharp eyes and a steady posture. She didn't waste time. Let's begin. HOA, you may present your claim. Carter stood up too fast, like he didn't understand court formalities. He cleared his throat and tried to look confident. Your Honor, he began, the homeowner failed to pay necessary fees for community maintenance, security, and common area upkeep. We are seeking payment of $1,350 plus penalties. He handed a stack of papers to the judge. The judge looked at them for only a few seconds before lifting an eyebrow. These documents look incomplete, she said slowly. I see no official stamp. No county record number. No registration certificate. Carter forced a smile. The HOA is in the process of updating its documentation, Your Honor. These forms are transitional. The judge looked unimpressed. Transitional paperwork doesn't hold legal weight. David watched Carter's face tighten. Daniel takes the floor. The judge turned to David. Mr. Collins, your response? Daniel stood smoothly, his tone calm and clear. Your Honor, the HOA suing my client isn't a legally recognized entity. We have official county records showing his property has no HOA connection, and the original HOA for that area was dissolved 12 years ago. He handed forward a folder. The judge flipped through it, nodding slowly. Furthermore, Daniel continued, the individual calling himself Mr. Carter appears to be using the name of a former HOA board member who is now elderly and retired. We believe this is identity misuse or worse. Carter's head snapped up. That's not true, he blurted out. We're legitimate. Daniel didn't react. He simply laid another piece of evidence on the table. This is the actual archived list of the old HOA board. The real Mark Carter was 65 at the time of dissolution. The man standing here today is clearly not him. The courtroom murmured. Even the judge leaned forward, studying the document. Carter looked pale now. The judge tests Carter. Mr. Carter, the judge said sternly, do you have legal proof that your HOA exists? A charter? Updated registration? Any document that matches county records? Carter licked his lips nervously. The documents are being processed. That is not an answer. The woman beside Carter whispered frantically in his ear. He shook her off, trying to keep control. The judge's voice sharpened. Mr. Carter, if you cannot provide proof, you cannot sue any homeowner. Do you understand that? Carter finally cracked. We have the right, he snapped. People owe us money. Daniel stepped in calmly. Your Honor, they are collecting money from homeowners without legal permission. This is a scam, organized and intentional. Carter stood up too fast again. You don't understand, he shouted. We kept this neighborhood running when no one else cared. We deserve payment. The judge's gavel slammed down. Sit down. The whole courtroom went silent. The truth unravels. With everyone quiet, the judge said, I will ask one final time, do you have any legal standing to operate as an HOA? Carter's hands curled into fists. His eyes darted around. The fight in him drained away. No, he muttered. Louder, the judge demanded. No, he said again, barely above a whisper. The judge looked toward David. Mr. Collins, you are not required to pay a single cent. This case is dismissed immediately. David felt his chest lighten, like someone had finally lifted a heavy weight off it. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, she said, turning to Carter's group, attempting to collect fees without legal authority is fraud. I will be reporting this to the district attorney. Expect further investigation. Carter's face went white. The woman beside him began crying quietly. The man on his other side stared at the floor, defeated. David didn't feel joy or revenge. He just felt relief, deep, quiet relief. As the court clears. As the courtroom emptied, Carter walked past David, stopping for just a moment. His voice was low, cold, and shaky. You think this is over, he whispered. Daniel stepped between them instantly. Yes, Daniel said firmly. It is. Carter glared, but there was fear in his eyes now. Real fear. He knew he wasn't walking away from this clean. And for the first time, David realized something. Carter wasn't the mastermind. Someone else was giving orders. Someone higher. Someone hidden. The battle was won. But the war might not be. The courtroom victory should have brought David peace. It should have ended everything, the threats, the letters, the black sedan, the mysterious warnings. But the opposite happened. That night, David sat alone in his living room, lights dim, his mind replaying Carter's final whisper. You think this is over? The words kept echoing, crawling under his skin. They felt less like a threat, and more like a clue. A hint that someone else was still in the shadows. David knew Carter wasn't the mastermind. The man was too nervous, too sloppy, too emotional to run such a well-planned scam alone. Someone else had built this. Someone smarter. Someone who stayed quiet, always hiding behind others. The visit from an unexpected person. The next morning, David stepped outside to check the mail. For the first time in weeks, there were no letters taped to his door. No envelopes lying on the ground. He breathed out, relieved. But then he noticed a figure standing near the edge of his yard. A woman. Thin, nervous-looking, wearing a gray sweater. She kept glancing around as if afraid someone might see her. David recognized her immediately. She was one of the people who had sat beside Carter in court. "What are you doing here?" David asked, keeping his distance. The woman looked terrified, her voice shaking. I shouldn't be here. But you need to know the truth." David's heart rate quickened. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. "What truth?" he asked cautiously. She held a folded piece of paper in her hands, gripping it so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "It wasn't Carter," she whispered. "He wasn't the one running things. We were all following someone. Someone who never shows his face." David frowned. "You mean there's someone else behind the HOA scam?" The woman nodded quickly. "He controls everything from behind the scenes. He gives the orders, he creates the documents, he tells us who to target." She glanced around again, whispering even softer. "We call him the chair." David felt a cold shiver crawl across his skin. "The chair," he repeated. "That's not a real name." "No," she said. "But that's what he wants to be called." David took a step closer. "Why are you telling me this?" Tears filled her eyes. "Because after court, he blamed everything on us. He said we failed him. He said we embarrassed him. And now he wants to remove loose ends." David understood instantly. Remove loose ends meant she was in danger. Real danger. "And you think I can help?" "No," she said. "I think someone needs to know before he comes for you." She pressed the folded paper into David's hand. "Please, be careful." Then she hurried away down the street, constantly looking over her shoulder. Within seconds, she was gone. The paper. David walked inside quickly and locked the door. Then he unfolded the paper. His breath caught. It was a list. Names. Addresses. Phone numbers. At the top of the page. Target Homes, Phase 2. David scanned the list and his stomach twisted when he saw his own name near the top. David Collins. Address. Notes, resistant. Push harder. His hands trembled. This was no small scam. They had a list. A plan. A strategy. And if this woman hadn't brought the paper, he would still be in the dark. But something else stood out, something even more chilling. At the very bottom of the page, under a separate section labeled Leadership Contacts, there was a handwritten phone number. But no name. Just a title. The Chair. David whispered to himself. This guy is real. Daniel's warning. David drove straight to Daniel's office. He didn't call first. He didn't wait. He marched into the small legal practice and dropped the paper onto Daniel's desk. Daniel scanned it carefully. His eyes widened slowly. This isn't just a scam, Daniel said in a low voice. This is organized extortion. A small criminal network. David nodded. And there's a leader. Daniel tapped the bottom of the page where the number was written. The Chair. We need to go to the police, David said. We will, Daniel replied. But let me make one thing clear, this man will not stop easily. He's been doing this for years. He knows how to hide. And he definitely knows about you. David felt his chest tighten. So what do we do? Daniel leaned back, thinking. We gather everything. Every letter, every photo, every recorded call. We build a case strong enough that he can't escape from. David nodded slowly. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't a detective. But this was his home and someone had targeted him. He wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. The call that shouldn't have happened. That evening, David was sorting through the documents again when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A deep voice, calm, emotionless, spoke from the other end. Mr. Collins. David froze. He didn't recognize the voice. He didn't like how steady it sounded. Who is this? David asked quietly. The voice didn't hesitate. You've been busy. David's breath caught. His skin prickled. Who are you? He asked again. The voice continued. You went to the county office. You met with your lawyer. You spoke with one of my former associates. David's fingers tightened around the phone. I don't know who you think you are. You know exactly who I am, the voice interrupted. And you should stop what you're doing. David swallowed. The chair. There was a pause. A long, cold pause. Then the voice said. You're smarter than I expected. David forced his voice to stay steady. I'm not afraid of you. You should be, the chair replied softly. Because I'm not finished with you yet. The line went dead. David stared at the phone, heart pounding in his ears. The truth was out now. There was someone bigger. Someone dangerous. Someone watching. And he was no longer hiding. The call from the chair echoed in David's ears long after the line went dead. His house felt smaller. The walls felt closer. And every shadow looked like it was hiding someone. But fear didn't control him this time. Something had changed in David. After weeks of threats, lies, and traps, he had finally reached a point where enough was enough. He would not run. He would not hide. He would end this fully and completely. A new resolve. The next morning, David packed every document he had collected over the past month. Letters from the fake HOA. Photos of the clipboard man. Court papers. The list of Phase 2 targets. The number labeled the chair. He organized everything into 3 folders: evidence, witness statements, and criminal activity. He wasn't just protecting his home anymore. He was going to stop this scheme so no one else in the neighborhood would suffer. The police meeting. Daniel arranged a meeting at the police station. They sat in a quiet office with gray walls, waiting. Officer Ramirez entered, a strong, calm man with sharp eyes. Daniel handed him the folders. We believe a fake HOA group has been targeting homeowners, he said. And they are led by a man who calls himself the chair. Ramirez raised an eyebrow but stayed professional. Let me take a look. For 10 minutes, the officer flipped through the pages silently. His expression changed from curious, to serious, to angry. When he finally looked up, he said just 2 words. This is big. David sat forward. So you believe us? Ramirez nodded. We've had reports before. Scattered. Nothing solid. But this, he tapped the evidence. This is a full operation. You may have exposed a criminal ring. Daniel asked, what can we do? Ramirez looked at David. You gave us what we needed. Now it's our turn. The sting operation. Over the next week, police launched an investigation. They traced the phone number tied to the chair. They tracked old HOA accounts. They interviewed the terrified woman who had warned David. Piece by piece, a picture formed. The chair was real. He was smart. He was hidden. But he made one mistake: he underestimated David. Police discovered that the chair had been running fake HOAs across several neighborhoods, collecting fees from homeowners who didn't know their HOA had dissolved years ago. It was the perfect crime. Until David stepped in. Now the police wanted to end it. They planned a sting operation to lure the chair out. David agreed to help. The meeting that changed everything. One late evening, David waited in a public park, pretending to hold a folder of extra documents. He was wearing a wire. Undercover officers hid in cars and behind buildings. He felt his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. Every minute felt like a lifetime. Then he saw a figure walking toward him. A man in a black coat. Calm. Slow. Confident. He stopped 5 feet in front of David. Mr. Collins, the man said. You're causing me a great deal of trouble." David recognized the voice immediately. "The chair." "Why me?" David asked quietly. "Because you said no," the chair replied. "Most people don't fight. They pay. You refused." David kept him talking. "I wasn't even part of your HOA." The chair smirked. "Details. No one checks those." "But I did," David replied. "And so did the police." The chair's smile faded. In that second, he realized something was wrong. He turned just as officers surrounded him from every direction. "Hands where we can see them. Don't move. You're under arrest." The chair didn't fight. He simply looked at David, expression unreadable. "You could have walked away," he said softly. "But you didn't." David stared back. "No. Because someone had to stop you." Police handcuffed him and took him away. For the first time in weeks, David finally felt the tension in his chest release. It was over. The aftermath. 2 days later, Officer Ramirez visited David's house. "The chair confessed," the officer said. "He's connected to scams in 5 counties. Your evidence made it possible to shut him down." David felt a wave of relief wash over him. "So, it's really finished?" Ramirez nodded. "No more letters. No more threats. No more fake HOA. You helped stop something big." David thanked him sincerely. After the officer left, David walked around his quiet home. The street felt peaceful again. The air felt lighter. For the first time in months, the neighborhood looked normal. He saw Mrs. Miller walking her dog. He saw kids riding their bikes. He saw neighbors mowing their lawns. People waved at him, thanking him silently for fighting a battle they didn't know existed. A final message. That night, David sat on his porch with a cup of tea. His phone buzzed a new voicemail. He hesitated, then pressed play. The voice wasn't the chair. It was the woman who had warned him. "Thank you," she said. "For helping us. For standing up. I'm safe now, and so are others." For the first time, David truly felt proud. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a fighter. He was just a man who refused to be bullied. And that simple choice changed everything. A new start. David filed all the documents into a box labeled "Closed." He placed it in the back of his closet. Not because he expected trouble again, but because it reminded him of something important. Courage isn't loud. Courage isn't violent. Sometimes, courage is just the moment you say, "No. Enough." And that small moment can end a storm. David looked at his peaceful home one last time before going to bed. This time, he knew one thing for sure. The fight was over. The danger was gone. And life could finally return to normal. Victory wasn't just winning in court. Victory was getting his life back.